This is an application that has skyrocketed the popularity.
Around 72,000 images were compromised.
These men never consented to having their pictures put.
Like, imagine if, like, this was flipped on the other way around.
It doesn't make it okay when women do it either.
This is the T app. It's an app that focuses on dating advice and was published in 2023. But what made it stand out from other dating apps like Tinder is that it was purely focused on providing a safe and private online community for women who were trying to find the right partner for themselves. The way that this app would accomplish this is by asking you for ID verification or selfies of you holding something like your driver's license next to you. For the community aspect of the app, you could upload screenshots of men you were thinking of potentially dating, and the app would provide a rating system where users could vote if the person looks safe or maybe suspicious. This would allow other users to look at the image, trace it back to the original social media accounts, and then ultimately give in their vote. This voting system and the ability for people to look into the person was what made the T app stand out. It wasn't just an ordinary dating app where people got to know each other over text and then arrange dates. It was almost like a sisterhood, a quote-unquote safe space to spill tea. And although these things are generally good things and allow women to have a safer online dating experience, this is also where things go wrong most of the time. Whenever there is a community hyper-focused on one subject, this will almost every time form subgroups who tend to go overboard with this concept. Long-term viewers of the channel are aware of the video I made about looksmaxing and the looksmaxing forum. Pretty much, the Looksmax website was a forum where people could talk about looksmaxing. But when we dug deeper, we found out that there was a sub-community within the forum that was promoting acts of self-harm, DIY surgery, and more extreme things in order to achieve a certain look. And when you compare it to the T app, which to be fair is about a completely different topic, it can still lead to the same effects. In fact, this app doesn't even try to hide the fact that it wants you to look very deep into the history of a person you may consider dating, because the app has features that allow you to almost in a way dox the person you're considering dating. And even though the concept of the app is pretty positive, it still leads me to one particular question. Why and how is it so easy for the T app to help you dox somebody? As previously discussed, because of T's focus on dating and making sure they don't come across the wrong men, this allowed women to easily dox whoever they were looking into. And while this core concept of online safety is an innovative idea considering how dangerous it is for people when it comes to online dating, it could still pave the way for users who aren't trying to find a partner, but rather dox someone to potentially blackmail them with information. Since the T app was strictly made for females with the requirement of ID verification, this means that potentially thousands of people who were not on this app were not aware that their information was being leaked to random users. Based on what the app advertises, it seems like all you need is an image, name, or phone number, and just like that, you'd be able to find dozens of results to find images of people on other platforms, and potentially even their addresses through the phone number lookup feature. And the reason why it's so easy for this to even be possible in the first place is because of the US making private data easily accessible. Individuals like data brokers are people that can easily collect information on individuals from pretty much anywhere on the internet, and sometimes companies can even sell this information to them. But it isn't just companies that sell your information to these data brokers. These people can even go as far as to search government records to build fully detailed profiles on random people. This can include information from websites like White Pages, which is pretty much a site that offers reverse name, number, or address lookups. What's even more disgusting is that these sites would even hide the specific details about the person being looked up behind a paywall, making them potentially millions of dollars in return for selling data of potentially thousands or millions of innocent people. There's also something in the US called the Freedom of Information Act, or FOIA, which provides the public with a right to request access to records from any federal agency. Now, although they do have 9 exemptions in place, with one of them being personal privacy or national security, the general concept of the FOIA still contributes heavily to the vast amount of information collected by data brokers and ultimately used on apps like T. But what happens when someone with the bare minimum programming knowledge finds out about an app like this? What happens when the users of this app that are doxing men for their own research become the victims? Just last month, in July 2025, the T app suffered a data breach that resulted in 72,000 user images to be published. Alongside these images, hackers also posted 13,000 highly sensitive images consisting of selfies or ID photos, which were used for verification, and 59,000 images that were publicly viewable for users inside the app. What was also very quickly apparent was that this breach wasn't the result of a sophisticated and highly planned out cyber attack. It was simply because the app's database was unprotected and hosted on Google's Firebase, a website used to build and ship apps for phones or web-based apps. There was no form of encryption or even something as simple as password protection. At this point, people on Twitter and 4chan were posting all of this information, and at one point, searchable maps for driver IDs of the users were also emerging, allowing people to easily dox and potentially even harass these individuals. After the initial exposure of all these images, DMs were also getting leaked, which prompted the T app to take its messaging systems offline. These DMs did even more damage towards the T app as it contained messages from users that were talking about abortions, as well as degenerate things like cheating on their partners and leaking phone numbers. Now, after all of this was said and done, the team behind the T app stated that this breach had affected users who signed up before February of 2024, saying that this vulnerability was because of a legacy data system that was more than 2 years old. But I want to take a step back. Although this breach is very unfortunate, I'm still left wondering, how could a company mess up this badly on protecting their database from what were pretty much script kiddies? The truth is, the T app breach didn't happen because of some genius hacker group pulling off a high-level attack. It wouldn't even have made sense because the T app wasn't even that big and wasn't even around that long. It happened because they didn't even care to set up their database properly, as previously mentioned. No password, no encryption, no authentication, nothing. The entire database, including selfies, government IDs, and private messages, was just sitting out in the open. All someone had to do was look at the right spots. When companies are in a rush to grow, to meet investor expectations, or just to go viral, security usually becomes a secondary goal after the success and fame. In this particular case, it seemed like the T app's priority was getting out the app over making it safe, maybe because they thought this was going to be a revolutionary social media app. But this goal meant cutting corners and delaying hard decisions. And it's pretty embarrassing because even small startups follow simple principles like encrypting sensitive data, setting up password protection on their databases, testing their systems regularly for weak spots, and only storing data that's absolutely necessary on their servers. But T didn't do any of that. They stored verification selfies and IDs way longer than they were supposed to. This becomes apparent when looking at other services like Google, who delete your ID as soon as the verification process is completed, as well as Apple, who allow users to delete their own private data themselves, giving their users more control over their sensitive info. The same principle applies to the T app. People had submitted their information because they were promised exclusivity. And although the tools T gave users access to that are considered controversial, there's always a small group on any app that won't use tools like these who are still targets because of the breach. What's even worse is how the company tried to defend it. They said the data was stored to comply with law enforcement requests, like cyberbullying investigations. Even if that's true, that still doesn't explain why the user data wasn't protected. Following the law is not the same thing as protecting people. You can be technically compliant and still reckless, which is exactly what happened to this platform. So, what are the consequences? Legally speaking, it would depend on if the users were specifically based in the US, because in some countries, mishandling personal data like this can lead to massive fines of up to millions of dollars. But in places where laws are weak or outdated, companies might walk away with damaging the lives of potentially millions of users. Even if there are no big fines, money won't change the damage that's already been done. The map of doxed users, the abuse that certain users might have faced, and the hundreds of videos about this topic leading to the immortalization of this insane screw-up. But if we take a step back, the real question that should be asked is that if one app like this can cause this much harm, what about the hundreds of other apps just like it? What happens when multiple startup companies believe they have an app that will change the internet and rush to bring it out with no attention at all to the back-end side of it? And more importantly, what happens when no one is held accountable? The T app isn't the only app being careless about its users' data. It's just one example of a much bigger issue happening in tech for a long time now, especially with up-and-coming apps. Every now and then, there's a new app blowing up on TikTok or Reddit. Sometimes they go viral for innovating something new, and sometimes it's because something went terribly wrong. The problem is this: everyone wants to be first to launch, first to get press, and first to secure funding. And in that rush, and depending on the development company, sometimes they prioritize release date and not a functioning app. This isn't just the case with social media apps, but also with games like Halo Infinite that came out with a handful of the features that were promised either not being done yet or getting completely abandoned by the team. Because the truth is, there's no reward for being careful. Most apps don't go viral because of how much they care about your data, and investors don't always write headlines about a team that spent 6 months encrypting their servers. But you do get headlines when your app is used as a doxing tool and when 70,000 selfies leak because you forgot to add something as simple as a password to your database. And this isn't just about dating apps. Think about how many apps you've downloaded that asked for your face, your ID, your location, and your contacts. That's your entire identity handed over to people you don't know, running companies you've never heard of. Most of these apps aren't built with the focus of being safe. They're built to be fast to release, fast to grow, and fast to get acquired. And in this race of trying to bring out apps quickly, mistakes like these can have huge impacts on the private lives of people, including some who may not have even used the doxing features of the T app. And the disturbing part is that this cycle keeps repeating itself. T isn't even the only app that's new and has been exposed for being insecure. It's just one of the few that got caught. Most of the other apps don't even make the news, and most of the breaches don't go as viral as the others. In fact, in the middle of writing this video, there's already been another data breach of an app called T on Her. The app is quite literally a rip-off of the T app and has all the same features, and now has also suffered the same damage as the original one. So now we're stuck with this new reality where apps get built faster than they can be secured, users give away data faster than they can protect it, and the companies behind them walk away faster than they can be held accountable. All of this could potentially become a bigger issue in the future with the introduction of AI for app development, as these kinds of apps can be made faster than it would take with a human team, but at the same time with even more bugs and poorly secured databases. Now, all of what I said about data obviously isn't the only problem here. The fact that the owner of the T app, Sean Cook, created the app because of a deeply personal incident involving his mother and then took it to the absolute extreme with these doxing tools is completely unacceptable. There are surely other ways to keep people safe with online dating, because sure, maybe you can find out if somebody's a trustworthy person or not with the reverse lookup features, but online bullies could also just use this data for a completely different reason, and apps like T would be a front for this, because once people have the data, they can do anything with it. And this doesn't only apply for females, it applies for everyone. No matter what gender you are, your actions still speak louder than who you appear to be online. I personally think having tools allowing users to dox others is just straight up wrong. Of course everybody should feel safe when dating online, but there are limits when it comes to privacy. And when you cross those boundaries, the internet won't stop at just leaking your data.